gonna say welcome, but I don't even think we decided on a podcast name yet.
No, there's
No,
no name.
no, there's no name. So we don't know the name yet, but maybe when you're listening to this, you'll know the name and or the topic, because the whole shtick of this is we're going to be recording a podcast until we find a topic to podcast about. So
Hell yeah.
it's pretty much just going to be whenever Hank gets tired of me, he'll just be like, "All right, this is the topic," and then we're done. That's it. The podcast
Also,
is over.
hello, I'm Hank.
I'm Junky, and it feels weird to say that because it's like it could be the wrong kind of podcast if you're like, "Yo, Hank's talking to that junkie over there." That's the podcast.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I think the first thing that needs to be discussed while trying to discuss a topic to discuss
Uh-huh.
is how long do you think we're going to have per episode to talk? Because then I think that will be able to filter off what topics we can discuss or not discuss. Because if, like, let's say the episodes are 30 minutes, it's like, all right, those are some, like, solid, small to mid tier topics we do. But if it's an hour, then it's like, holy shit, man. We could do, like, one large topic. So is there.
I find I tend to go on if I have things to say.
Mm-hmm.
I can keep going usually.
Okay. So,
Or find a tangent to keep going on if nothing
yes.
else.
Yes, okay. So, like many things in this podcast, that is not decided yet. It will pretty
Mhm.
much be a case by case basis of what we are passionate about. So, I think the first thing that we maybe want to discuss is our first common uh, root, which is Mr. Paul Fletcher, is how we met.
Fletcher.
Uh huh. Mr. Paul Expo, don't call me Exposure Fletcher. So,
Uh-huh.
I think it could be interesting to discuss to the people that are listening to this, because they are also linked to Mr. Fletcher himself, how you discovered his content.
Oh, I found Paul through the Proton John.
Mm hmm. Same.
And I listened. So I was. So I found John's YouTube videos. Then I started listening to TDP,
Same.
which is the podcast he was on, and then I listened to Retro Kill Screen,
Mm.
which Paul did with him. So Retro Kill Screen was my introduction to Paul.
To Mr. Fletcher. Yeah, I would say it was the same. Like, Proton
Keep calling
John.
him Fletcher.
I feel like he deserves the title. It's something that he has earned. I would say like it was the same thing, but like I was like a Sugar Conroy stan back in the day, and then when he started the Runaway Guys, I was like, oh, like okay, like if his inspiration is Mr. Proton John, then like I should probably get to know this guy too. He probably sounds pretty cool. So then venturing off of that, like, oh, John's a cool guy too. I like his content, etc. And then when they started doing when he announced he was doing a podcast about gaming and shit, it was like, oh yeah, why not? And then eventually, Mr. Expo became a host, and I was like, yo, I vibe with this guy. He's a neat dude. Um, and then I don't know. I feel like it's been years, and like I can't like mentally wrap my mind around probably how long I've known of Paul, and that's like a scary thought because it's like holy shit, probably like TDP. Like I was listening to maybe back in high school, and for reference, I'm like 26 now, so it's like
Hmm.
holy shit, man. Like all the years really just kind of like combined and got compressed into Lord knows how long.
Uh-huh.
And then
Yeah.
I would say our second topic then of connection is video games and Twitch, because then we indirectly met through like just Twitch chat and talking through Paul's community. So when did you
Yeah.
first get into watching streams on Twitch or video game streaming in general?
That I can't really remember
Mm-hmm. I know. We're reaching deep.
at this point.
Mhm. We're reaching deep into each other's past. I would say, like, did you watch stuff on Justin before it became a Twitch?
No.
Okay. So then I like,
I like. Mm, I mean, I probably. I mean, I think mostly I just would watch John streams, Proton John streams, when he would
mm-hmm.
occasionally stream.
Mm,
And then, like, back when he didn't stream regularly, really.
yeah.
And then I feel like. I think watching Paul, just after listening to a lot of his podcasting, like listening to Pixel Response a lot,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like is what led me to that.
Okay. Yeah, same. I remember listening to Pixel Response and like the little ditty in the
Yeah.
intro. Um, I
Because
like,
I've never been a
yeah.
heavy Twitch user
Oh,
outside of
okay.
hanging out in Paul's chat.
So then you were
Really.
like, okay, like Paul brought you like sort of to Twitch in a way, or like Proton John.
Yeah.
Okay, so then like I was like super into like Call of Duty YouTube, like back in the day of
Mm.
Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare, and then like when that scene started blowing up, like the first popular streamers were on Justin, and I was like watching streams on there, and then when it eventually became Twitch, I like made an account day one, super into Call of Duty, like, and then when I eventually, I think, like, kind of lost interest in Call of Duty is when I kind of transitioned more into my interests in, like, I was always interested in gaming, but, like, I'm someone who, like, has, like, a main game that maybe takes, like, 70 to 80% of my interest. So with that kind
Mm.
of void gone, it was like, oh man, I need to, like, consume all the video game content. And that's where, like, TDP really, like,
Yeah.
kept my interest because it was exposing me to all these different type of games from people that, like, opinions I valued. And then with them, um like you said, like having the podcast and then knowing if John streamed and then Paul streamed and then when TDP streamed, it was just kind of all this mishmash of content. So I would say like I
Yeah.
like use Twitch primarily, and then like through Twitch I got more invested into that sort of content rather than like that kind of content driving me to Twitch, like your experience.
Yeah. I think what drove me to Twitch probably is like going from watching YouTube videos to watching Twitch VODs
Mm,
that didn't get put on YouTube or whatever. Is
yeah.
probably the break there, and then like eventually catching stuff live.
Yeah.
Because even like even like as a YouTube user, I was definitely I took for forever to ever subscribe to anything. I would just find a YouTube video I liked. I don't even know how I found YouTube videos. Like honestly,
Yeah,
I
really.
would look at a thing and then I would a lot of my internet bouncing around is finding a creator I like,
Hmm.
con- looking at all the stuff of theirs I liked, and then seeing what branches from them I could find, like who they
Yes.
recommended or who they worked with or made stuff with or whatever,
Yeah, total
and
word of
sort of
mouth.
spidering my way out and not like going by like algorithm or whatever.
Yeah, because even like back when we used YouTube, like people don't realize how drastically different YouTube has shifted over the years, and especially even just recently, like with how the algorithm worked, how like YouTube videos, like when we used to watch YouTube, like the video limits were 10 minutes. You could not upload a video longer than 10 minutes. Like it
Yeah.
was so bizarre back then, and I think once like the call like I used to watch a lot of Call of Duty gameplay, like let's plays, and then as like those mediums kind of slowly like peaked and then faded off because there was that huge like couple of years where everyone was let's playing, like gameplay with videos were like the thing and what the algorithm started favoring because they were such long form content, and then all of a
Hmm.
sudden that died off. And really transitioned to streaming, and it's like I haven't really looked back since. Like I would say I use now Twitch way more than YouTube, where it used to be, Twitch was kind of like a appetizer, complemented my main YouTube consumption, and now it's totally
Yeah.
switched where I maybe follow like 5 to 10 YouTube like channels, and then Twitch it's like I have so many people I follow, and like
Man.
the interactive medium I find so much more engaging, and it's like a YouTube view has to be so much more gripping to me, and I think it's also I'm no longer like the primary demographic now. Like there aren't emerging YouTube channels that are like aimed towards like my age, which I also think helped the transition where Twitch has an older audience compared to YouTube where it's like I don't know, man. Like I remember when the first YouTuber got like 1 million subscribers, and now there's like literally tens of thousands of YouTube channels with millions of subscribers I just have
Yeah.
never heard of, which is bizarre to me. So I'm just like, all right, man. I'm like, I hang in the hat. Like, all right, I'm done. This is not for my this is for the Zoomers now. Like, I'm just kind of
Fucking
hands off. Like, all right, my time has
you
come.
child.
Right? Like, I have to go to the Twitch retirement home. Like, find my content. Like, similar with
Wow.
TikTok. I'm like, I kind of look at TikTok with like very like arm's length. Like I consume like what their algorithm gives me, which is like their algorithm is so freaking smart,
Yeah.
man. Holy shit. Like TikTok
I've
is
never used TikTok
it's dangerous. It
because
is
I'm a
a
skeleton.
very dangerous app. Like that app like more so than any other thing. Like I'm on Twitter, Reddit, etc.
Yeah.
Like TikTok will literally consume 3 hours of my life and in a blink of an eye, and you don't even realize it. It is insanity, and that's why I'm like, I can't get
Yeah.
into this, man. Like I'll look at TikTok maybe once a month, and then that's it. It's like, nope, I don't want to get it. I don't want to learn about TikTok.
Yeah,
But
I
like,
generally don't like getting my content from an algorithm. Like I'll
mm,
try it, but I'm pretty wary of it cuz like I've had too many cases of like it leading me to something I'm like I'm kind of like this and like no, I don't like this at all. Fuck this. I'm out of here.
and you're like, you think you know me, or like that's your impression of me. You just get like turned off from it forever.
Yeah. Yeah, like the last probably YouTube video I saw was like someone playing a game I liked, and then like I watched a VOD of their stream and they were talking about conspiracy stuff. Like, fuck it, I'm out.
You're like, all right,
Oh no.
shit.
Whoops. Wrong way. Wrong door.
Hey, almost got sucked in. That's
I'm
how they get
done.
you, man. But YouTube
Yeah.
recommendations are absolutely insanity. Like they are actually out of control. If you watch
Well,
like you said, like a
okay.
YouTube.
Usually it's fine for me because I'm so specific with my YouTube. Like
Okay.
most of my YouTube recommendations are videos I've watched already.
Nice.
like that's how insular my YouTube usage is. Every once in a while it'll branch out, but
Yeah, so you have it like figured out because
it's
like
pretty
I'll
tight.
get like I watch like I would say like on YouTube a lot of like political commentation, and it's like that is
Oh
like
yeah. No.
the
I don't
recommended
do that
videos
on
under
YouTube.
those are just the most in absolutely batshit crazy stuff I've ever
Yeah.
seen in my life, and I'm
Mhm.
just like help, like it's terrifying for like because we were like exposed to the internet like at its early phases, and like even back in the day I remember like you'd get like warned about like the dangers of the internet or whatever, and you'd be like, yeah, whatever, I can navigate it, shut up, mom or dad. But now it's like actually like maybe I'm the boomer and like they think that same thing when I warn them, but it's like holy shit, man, having kids like today, or like having being a kid in today's internet age is like actually scary. Like with how much like social media has taken over, and like you said, like different algorithms and different things, and it's like all kind of like it's not the Wild West anymore, and like a lot of stuff is like figured out almost to like a fault, if that makes sense.
I get like just the platforms feel so solidified currently,
Yes.
and I hate it because I don't like
Yeah.
the platforms having any power.
Yeah, exactly. Like there were so many like different social medias kind of like at similar levels, or like even like the concept of a viral video. It's like there were different viral videos on different websites, and now it's
Yeah.
like a handful of select platforms that like can make things go viral. And even then that term viral has been, co-opted, and like there'll be a video where it gets like maybe 50,000 views, and you'll see articles like
Yeah.
this video goes viral. It's like, no, that's not
Does
viral. Stop it.
I don't think things go viral, and I don't think that's even a thing.
Like it's
I
so
just don't.
rare, I think,
Well,
now.
and it's like, so if it happens, it's part of the platform. Like something trending on Twitter will happen,
Mm-hmm.
but that's like a feature of the website. That's
True.
not like this sickness that spreads from person to person.
Mm-hmm. Or like,
Um,
because even like I would say like TikTok has been like the primary like source of viral
yeah.
content, like especially with like music.
hmm
Like there will
I
be
mean, it feels
songs that
that
will
way
blow
because
up.
I only see TikToks on Twitter.
Yes,
So.
same. So exactly, and then that's how I learned it too. Like once a TikTok is big enough for Twitter to be talking about
Yeah.
it, that's like my filter too of like, oh, okay, this is probably big, or like has impacted enough people. And like it's especially big with music because like so many artists and different songs like blow up on
This
TikTok
is
first and then they
this
have
has
a
spread
career.
its seed far enough to hit my bubble.
Exactly though. And that's how I like it. Like I don't want to be too close, man. Like I like that filter that Twitter like kind of applies where it's like, all right, if it's good or
No.
interesting enough, I'll
Yeah.
probably hear about it. I don't need to know about like the latest dance trends or anything like that. Like that stuff, like I don't find, that stuff going
Yeah.
quote unquote viral is not for me. No, thank you. Nope.
Yeah.
I opt out of that. Hmm. What other?
I also
Yeah.
like I don't know. My consumption of YouTube stuff is kind of supplementary to like my podcast listening. I
Mm.
feel like most of what I consume is like I just want more podcasts always.
And I
And
would
I
say,
have a lot
yeah.
I listen to regularly, and I don't honestly add new ones that often. But
Mm.
like that's what like podcasting is like where a lot of my appetite came from because I can do it like while going for a walk or doing the
Mm-hmm.
dishes or whatever or being at work.
Yeah. Like.
That was where podcasting became really important to me.
Mhm.
It's just something I need to have stuff to listen to.
Yeah, I would say like once my commute, like, once I started like going to work, and my commute sometimes would be an hour, and it was
hmm
like music I would primarily listen to, but then there's like just certain times where like I'm not in the mood to like fully focus on an album. So like podcasts, like
Yeah.
I would say like I've gone into more so the past 2 or 3 years where like that's like the perfect happy medium for me of like focusing enough on driving, but also like
Yeah.
supplementary
Uh,
like background noise, or like pay attention just enough and you're still kind of catching the gist of it. Or even like now with COVID, like playing a video game, and it's like, okay, either, having a stream in the background or listening to the podcast, which is like
mhm.
perfect. But I would say like what podcast maybe then segued like you into getting into podcasting more, other podcasts you discovered, like what was like kind of the topic that you were like, all right, I'm into it now.
I mean, it was probably like Pixel Response was probably the one.
Ooh,
Like,
full
I mean, like
180.
my first podcast was Top Down Perspective,
Yep.
and
Same.
then which is it's funny. Like I found Giant Bomb later because they kept talking about it on Top Down
Yes.
Perspective. It's like so I found that stuff backwards through that.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, and then listening to Paul and Nathan on Pixel Response was
Classic.
like big because those podcasts are long as hell, and I
Mhm.
needed long as hell
Yeah.
actual podcasts at the time. I just had a job where I just needed stuff in my ears.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally. And then I
and like I know if Paul, like my interest with Paul was like I left way too long a comment on something he posted on the website. Like, like I was just so fucking bored. I just like and had so many thoughts and like responding to this thing he posted after having listened to him so long was like the thing that then like I just had to vomit up.
No, I totally get that. Like, very similar. Like with like Paul's podcast, or everything. Like, I would if they like were talking about a game or series or like let's say movies, etc. Like that I knew of, then I would have opinions. But I think what kept my attention with that was because I didn't know like a lot of what they were talking about. So that's kind
Yeah.
of what gripped me. So it's like I didn't have a lot of thoughts. I just kind of like, oh shit, like this is just
Yeah.
a lot of learning for
Like
me.
I mean the other like my college experience was kind of weird and it was mostly like all of my classes were it was the Great Books program and it was all talking about primary source texts.
Hmm.
And then so me and my friends would like have that approach to talking about like comic books and movies and shit on
Hmm.
our time off. So that is like that was just I love it.
Yeah.
So that's like what I'm built for now. And then like then there was just I didn't have anyone to talk to for a while.
Yeah.
So
It like gave you the
it built up
framework
for
of
sure.
how to talk about your passions, pretty much.
Yeah, I always think about the media I'm consuming critically,
Hmm.
even if it's fucking stupid.
Yeah.
It's just like how I'm built.
No, and it's fun, like because
Mm-hmm.
it's like all rooted in your
Yeah.
passion or love for the details of something or why
Yeah.
something works or like I
It sometimes makes me feel like a robot because I can't just have it like sometimes it's like just getting to lower emotional response still takes work,
yeah,
but that's okay.
because you view it through such like an analytical lens, you're saying.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like the work that it takes to make it.
So like behind the scenes stuff. Okay. But see like I would like say like I'm
Well, I'm
very
thinking from like the creator's perspective, not even behind the scenes stuff. Just
what their intentions were.
like like a person did make this. This didn't just like come fully formed. Like the people
Yeah.
who talk about comic book characters like they're real people. Like that I can never get behind. Um which is why I've generally find like podcasts about comic books incredibly frustrating because people like just a lot of comic book fans approach the material that way,
Hmm.
and that's not where I'm coming from it at all. Even
Hmm.
though I've like I mean I've been reading that stuff since I was a kid, but uh yeah,
You
I
view it
think
as like a
that
lot
way
of
much
decisions
more as like yeah
stuff. Yeah, no,
yeah
that's
I'm not like Superman wouldn't win. He's not as strong. I'm like Superman will always win because he's the hero and the good guy wins. And this is a story for children.
so pretty much just like main character privileges. You're like, yep, I'm fully aware of that. That's
Yes,
like
because he should. Because it's a story for children where the good guy should win.
with either I think the balance that I find is like being self-aware enough of that, but like also still kind of like divulging into the fantasy of it. Like
Hmm.
for me, like I remember Naruto was like I think like a big like like I had a very similar approach of like well yeah of course Naruto is going to keep winning, like he's the main character, they're not going to kill him off, like like they have to but then like I found that part interesting because it was like as the stakes rose up it was like okay how the hell is the writer going to make it believable enough that Naruto can now beat this guy, or like what is he going to learn and
Yeah.
something like that. So I think that can be like interesting or fun to consider. But then with comics, like if it's like real life people, that can be like even trickier because there's so many interpretations of like a hero's strengths, if they're good, if they're bad, if they have this storyline, if they have that storyline. So then it's kind of like there's no definitive, like you said, like Superman, like kid story, good wins, blah. But then there's like Superman like goes evil and then like fucks everyone up, and it's like oh shit, like. But then
Yeah.
again, like, I find those stories then more compelling because of it, like, twisting the original formula. Like, Civil
Well,
War
yeah.
series was the first comic book series I ever read, and what got me into it was like, holy shit, like, they're just killing each other. Like, what is this? They're not
I
supposed to
fucking
fight
hate.
each other.
I hate Civil War. I
Really?
hate it. Yeah.
Why? I'm very curious. It's not like I'm like a stan of Civil War, but like I found the concept very like, ooh, like,
um, the characters were out of character. It
mm,
was like incredibly frustrating to me. Um, yeah, like I don't like one of the writers, Mark Millar. I've real or Mike Miller, I think it's pronounced,
I will
but it's
not be able to
still
help
his
you with
name.
that.
I really don't like his comics generally because he has like a disdain for the audience that shines through a lot. It's like he kind of hates comic book readers,
That's
and like so a lot of his stories end with like pulling the rug out and it being or shit. Like compare his version of Kick-Ass to the movie Kick-Ass.
hmm
Like in the comic, the character Big Daddy, who's played by Nick Cage in the movie, like
hmm
he's a phone, like he made his whole backstory is made up, like he's just a liar, he's just
hmm
a piece of garbage. Whereas in like, the movie, he's like, it it the joke is this kid who thought he was going to be a superhero in a world without superheroes. It turns out he was in a world with superheroes.
right.
He was just wrong about the universe he was in. Whereas like the comic is more about gotcha moments to make you feel bad for liking a thing or whatever. It doesn't appeal to me.
No, that's super interesting to think about because it's like I think what
But like with specifically Civil War, like I didn't uh, like Reed Richards siding with Iron Man or whatever. Like it just didn't feel right.
hmm
Like the part of it that made sense to me is if you're going to take the Marvel universe as a whole,
hmm
the big thing you have to reconcile is the world of the X-Men with the world of the Avengers.
hmm
Where the Avengers, like, in the world of the Avengers, the US government is, like, not super evil, and in the world of X-Men, the US government is incredibly
True.
evil.
Yes.
So, Civil War didn't deal with that, though. Like,
Mm.
the X-Men stuff didn't fucking do anything with it until afterwards.
Yeah.
And I like a lot of the, like, Dark Reign turned out to be a great setting for X-Men stories, because you have Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, as the head of Hammer instead of Shield. Like he's the face of the U.S. government. He's just a supervillain,
yeah.
and though that worked way better for as the thing for the X-Men to fight against, in a
Totally.
world where the Avengers were the bad guys, or the public, like, corporate Avengers were the bad guys.
Mm. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like I would say like
And like it just didn't, like, yeah, the idea that they would pass the Superhuman Registration Act and Captain America would go rogue, that checks out. That's a thing he
mhm.
would do. He's gone rogue so many times.
Yeah.
But Iron Man backing it just didn't feel right. Like all the heroes they chose to like make scabs,
hmm
it kind of pissed me off. Like the Reed Richards one in particular. It's like, why? Why
Yeah.
are you like doing this?
No, totally. I would say like I'm trying to think like I think maybe like the shock
And
value
also
of it all was so appealing.
the stuff they did with the Spider-Man of him siding with Tony also.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That like broke my I even know how maybe I was in like 7th or 8th
Yeah.
grade. That broke my heart,
Yeah.
man. Like and then he
It's just
revealed
like,
himself. I was like, "Oh, you can't
and
do
like,
that."
yeah, well, they couldn't do it because they had to write terrible Spider-Man stories to undo it. Like the stuff they had to do to fucking undo it was even worse.
See, so then like yeah, so then your dislike, you had to see the repercussions of all these decisions they made in the story. I just kind of like saw the train crash, was
Yeah.
amused, and just kept walking afterwards.
Yeah. Whereas like a lot of the the big event stuff I like. It's stuff that I could understand someone else finding insufferable. It's like fixing old stories. It's like if you find a clever way to find what was good in this old thing that didn't work and then build on top of it, that I like.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can find the angle to turn stuff around, like in Dan Slott's Spider-Man run, he brought back a lot of Clone Saga stuff and built on top of it, and I loved it because he was like telling good stories with these ideas and characters that came from really bad comics where people were writing stuff and they had no idea where it was going or what they were doing.
Yeah, like there wasn't enough. Like, see, I feel like to pull that off, like either like you said, like one, this creator needs to come in with just such a clever angle or concept.
Yeah,
or
like
two,
you have to have a good writer and they have to be allowed to write the story they want to write.
Yeah,
that's true to the characters or whatever.
Yeah, or like I think like even bigger could be like just foresight of where they want to go with it, because I feel like sometimes like a story can be read where it's like you could tell like in certain shows or certain comics or certain movies, like they get to the point where they're like, they're not as confident about this part, like they didn't know where to go after this as much.
Some of my favorite examples come from 90s comics. Like they introduced this character Onslaught by having the Juggernaut was beat up and he's scared of this character Onslaught.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had any idea who Onslaught was when they put that comic out. They didn't have they hadn't thought it out at all. Like, who the fuck is Onslaught?
He's the guy that beat up Juggernaut. That's all you need to know. Clearly.
Exactly. And then it turned out it was Professor X with like the psychic memory of Magneto's evil in him from when Professor X like mind wiped Magneto to make him a good guy, which everyone was totally okay with in the moment for some reason. And then he turned into like this weird other thing. Like he separated himself from Professor X and then started eating people. like X-Man and Franklin Richards.
Just starts eating people.
And then the Hulk punched him really hard and his armor broke, and then inside was like a universe, and then all the heroes that weren't mutants had to jump into the universe to kill him, and then they all died, but Franklin Richards saved them all by putting them inside his like bouncy ball.
See, like,
and then they all got rebooted into number ones under different creative publishers because Marvel kind of sold off all their superheroes because they weren't as popular as the X-Men for like a year.
Like, as someone that like doesn't know enough about comics, like if I didn't have trust in you as a person to not lie to me, I'd be like, those drugs that you are on are very powerful. Thank you for that.
So the part where I started collecting comics was the last issue of Onslaught, where everyone jumps into him as a universe and dies, and then at the end they're like, and now we're rebooting the Fantastic Four, Avengers, Iron Man, and Captain America with new number ones.
Great.
In this new universe that takes place inside this kid's ball. And that's where I started collecting comics, like buying
that's
them
what
every
gripped
week
you.
as they were coming out.
That's where you're like, this is
that
my
was
passion.
Number ones.
It
was a good jumping on point.
Literally just jumping into
and like
Onslaught.
I bought a comic that had like all the heroes on the cover and was shiny or whatever.
Yeah, so you know what? I can't even like that's some like solid like kid logic though. So I can't even be mad at that.
Before that, I just had some Spider-Man comics.
Yeah.
Like from here and there.
See, like what got me into comics was like one, like the superhero movies, not like Marvel ones, but like the first Spider-Man one from Sony. Like, because my dad like was super into comics as a kid, and I never knew that like until Spider-Man kind of came out, and then he was like, he had like pretty much like almost every like important Silver Age comic, and he like he was like my dad was a very like very unemotional, very like kind of straight edge person. So the fact that like I saw him passionate about like Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, etc., like
Mm-hmm.
interested me enough to be interested in it, if that makes sense. And then
Mm-hmm.
like kind of talking to him about it, and then him being like, "Oh yeah, like I had the first comic, etc. Like these people were in." I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever you say." And he's like, "Oh well, yeah, no, like I had the comics, um, back in his like home state and stuff. So then when we eventually like ever visited there, like we ended up just taking all of them, and then like
Nice.
I like." Would sort through it. I was like, holy shit, like the first comic that Black Panther was in, the first comic Fantastic Four, like it was like so cool to like see that, but then also like to be in
Mm.
his shoes, to be like to have your childhood all of a sudden become relevant like 40 years later still, like that must be insane. Like, oh yeah, like the thing like that I've been like, it's the only thing that I can possibly think of for me is like Pokemon still being relevant. Like that's super cool to me because it's like 20 years ago,
Uh,
playing the card games, playing the video games.
yeah.
Kids today playing the card games, playing the video games. It's like, holy shit, man, Pokemon's still relevant. Like that's insane. But then it's like for this whole generation, it's like, and then future generations, you're still seeing almost your childhood live on and like do different things. And I think that's something like super powerful that like other mediums really can't compete with, if that makes sense.
Mm, I don't know. It's just the way thing goes. Honestly, the thing that's still fucking weird to me is like when I was getting comic books, X-Men was the super popular thing, but I
Hmm.
got into Avengers. And then Avengers became the biggest fucking thing in
Yeah.
the world. I'm like, even I'm like, really?
This
Huh? Okay, all right. That's where we're going.
is where we're going.
Cause like I found ins to it. I found like, okay, I get it. I get why Captain America is cool. I get why Thor is cool. I get why Iron Man is cool. But it was like I had to fucking work for it a little bit. Um, although it was weird, and it was also weird, like just as a kid, I found X-Men comics that were the most popular completely incomprehensible.
Mm,
Like '90s X-Men comics are so continuity laden, they just were impenetrable to me.
yeah.
Like literally, the my in eventually to X-Men comics wasn't until like that Dark Reign era, and I was like, you know what? This X-Men book has Namor on the cover, and I understand Namor, so that's where I'll make my
So
in.
I'll for sure understand this comic, and then it's the comic where everyone gets eaten, and then you're like, uh,
Well, yeah. Well, I mean that was when I was younger. This was when I was older, more seasoned comic book reader. I
okay,
was like Namor,
okay.
and it was Namor being mad at Norman Osborn or whatever. So I'm like, I can get into this. And then eventually turned out that run, Cyclops, they had made him amazing. They turned Cyclops into the new Magneto, and it was great, and I loved it.
That actually sounds like an incredible concept. No, like, see, I love when they like twist shit like that.
Yeah.
Like with there's that series where like, um, Batman's parents were like, like he died, and then like I forget which one was which. Like dad was Batman and mom was Joker. Like it was just like those sort of
The
fundamental
Flashpoint.
changes. Yeah, like that interests me a lot. Like those are the kind of
Mm.
comic book series that like I'll go out of my way to kind of find out like plot lines about, or like how did they do this, or what was they thinking and stuff like that. And then even not what was like the recent video game? It was a DC fighting one where like Superman's evil.
Injustice.
Yes. Like after
Yeah.
seeing like gameplay of that and like knowing what kind of like the storyline was, I was like, holy shit, man, I need to read like what the hell happened to this? Like why is Superman
Yeah.
bad? And why is he like those sort
Again,
of
that's the
things.
stuff I don't actually like because I'm being in the world of comics. It's
Uh-huh.
so oversaturated.
Mm.
Like the dark version of the stuff is just so overdone.
Yes.
It has to be really fucking good for me to like it.
Mhm.
My favorite example of like a dark gritty version of like a kid's story
Mhm.
is there's there's the third arc of Astro Boy is about this character Pluto who like he destroys all the greatest other robot fighters in the world, and eventually Astro Boy beats him or whatever.
Mhm.
And that got remade by Naoki Urasawa, who's known primarily I think in the U.S. for writing the series Monster, and he redid it as like a gritty like noir detective story,
Huh.
but also but it's the same plot. Like still Astro Boy shows up and wins at the end, but like it's about it's about like robot like
Detective.
and like robots like dealing with their humanity in like a world where people are fucking fuck robots or whatever.
Okay.
Like I think one of the first scenes is like the main detective who's a robot like telling this lower model detective like her husband died.
Oh.
It's just like his fucking and
Like throwing real life
it
kind
just
of
has,
elements into it more so.
yeah, and it has like a completely different and much more grounded art style
Hmm.
than Astro Boy's big circle head people.
Yeah. And see, I
And
find
it's just
that
like
stuff also
fucking
interesting.
really good.
Yeah.
The
No, it
series is
sounds
just
good.
called Pluto.
Yeah, like when I
And
think
turning like this one arc of Astro Boy into like a 8-volume manga.
okay. See, that's digestible.
Yeah.
Like that's not intimidating. Like that's also like something that I can have like
Yeah. No, like my favorite, like the other Naoki or so, it's like 18 volumes or like 25 volumes is 20th Century Boys.
oh okay.
Which is his other really good one. Those are harder to recommend to people because they're just fucking long. It's just a lot of comic,
That
and it's one story.
mm. But is it like gripping the entire way through? Because I don't care about length,
They're
but
like
just like
yeah, he's one of my favorite comic book creators. He might be my favorite living comic book creator. I don't know.
and that kind of
He's
goes back
fucking
into
great.
like the analytical, our analytical point of view of like what you like how you approach
Yeah.
like artistic mediums and like what piques your interest. So it makes sense that like with your kind of how you frame things, those are the kind of stories that like you'll find like be passionate about or like be
Yeah.
interested
Also, yeah, like this is also just in my bones. Like going back to a kid, one of my favorite songs was Froggy Went a Courtin' because I love just finding different versions of it.
in.
Like cuz it's just a folk song that has like this rhythm to it and it has a story, but like there are just a million different versions. Like every version of it will have some detail that's different or whatever. And I just wanted to like listen to every version of it I could find.
And then would you hyper focus on like the best one, or did you just kind of like appreciate them all as like equal different things?
Equal different things. Like I just wanted to see all the different ways it could be done. I had my preference is probably the Bob Dylan version is really good because it's Bob Dylan.
Yeah, right. True.
But yeah, no, I never hyper focused on any of the details. I just wanted to see all the versions. Like it's just, oh, it's a different version. Let me see that. And I like at that like I'm a little kid. I didn't really even think about it. It's just if there was a new version of Frogman and Corden, I'd be excited. It's like oh, seeing the same thing again but different. It just always appealed to me, which is I feel like part of why like comics was easy for me to get into. Like because again, the part of the one of the core ideas to the Marvel Universe is everything changes, nothing changes. Like you can change like any of the details, but like really big picture core thing, it's the same.
Yeah, like there's a frame that you're all allowed to kind of work in,
Yeah.
but you can't really step outside certain like you said core kind of fundamentals.
Yeah, but like what's fundamental can change. Like what is considered fundamental probably isn't fundamental or whatever. Like you can there's stuff that can be changed. Like Peter Parker doesn't have to be Spider-Man, for example.
True.
There's a core idea that you can get rid of and it doesn't actually matter. Spider-Man is Spider-Man. That's what matters.
That's a really good comparison because I think like you said people that like that you're not interested in like their kind of approach to comics is like thinking of them as people and like they would probably take that personally like when Miles got like announced and all that other shit. I remember like oh my god like they were so tied to Peter Parker is my Spider-Man and nobody else can do it And I
No,
think
I'm thinking about, oh, they actually are killing Spider-Man this time. Not like a year ago where they were pretending they were killing Spider-Man.
mm,
They did that story 2 years in a row, but then the second time they decided to make it stick.
I mean it this time.
Like the number of times, like I love looking at comic book like events that are like, oh, they're doing this. And it's like, yeah, they did that like a couple years ago or whatever,
Hmm.
but nobody cared then. But this time,
This time.
this time it's for real.
You called our bluff, and all right, fine, we'll do it.
Yeah. Well, it was like when people were getting mad about the Captain America Hail Hydra thing. Like I didn't actually ever get to those comics, but I was like, you guys don't understand comics if like you're getting mad about like this is a story that's gonna play out and maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad, but like the way you're approaching it is just wrong.
Yeah.
And then like I saw articles like of people like reacting to the next issue like the next issue took into consideration the response and wasn't also written well before the first issue came out. It's like it's just like made my head explode.
Yeah, because I feel like certain comics like
no,
that.
they
like,
played you. If this second issue worked on you, you got played. They played you like a fiddle.
But that's why, like, I think like stories like that, like those are the stories that like will actually get mainstream coverage, like to
Yeah.
non-comic book fans. So then, like you're saying though, like they will be played because they aren't part of that or like have the awareness of that. They just know of
Totally.
like, oh, Captain America, like their knowledge is Captain America fights Nazis, Chris Evans, bam, like
Yeah.
that's like movie's good, and then they see like that, like like it's that outrage of like, oh my god, is that what's gonna happen in the movie? How could they do, but then to like a comic book, person
Yeah, no,
with knowledge.
like people reacting that way, it's fine. But like when like articles are getting like people who are like theoretically have a brain and are analyzing this or whatever, all also are doing that.
Yeah, like they're
like
they're purposely not giving context to like someone that's maybe not from that world. So like,
I mean, it's
because then they know like, oh man, it'll get the clicks, it'll get
or like the people who have been hired to write are also still in that fan mindset. They still that's still how they approach stuff.
That's a good point too.
But I guess more people probably feel that way generally, so I guess that makes some sense when I step back and think about it, but like I really look for comic book writing that's any good, and it's so hard to find. Like for the longest time, the only stuff I could ever find was stuff that was like written with a feminism take on comic books. Just like, and I just read too much of it. That's like, yes, I understand. I can write these articles too now. I agree with a lot of these points, but I just don't need to read this anymore.
Yeah, like you kind of like
I want articles about craft, not like applying this theory over and over again to the thing.
Yeah, like it has to like it has to like supplement. It can't be the focus. Like similar to like when shows talk about like even morals or values or certain life lessons. If it's too like on the nose, like or is like people just see through it. Like people see through that shit, and like that's when they'll get annoyed. But then if it's handled with care or just like good storytelling fundamentals, like I think of like Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like people loved those characters because of the good story writing, good fundamentals. You learn to care about the characters, but if like they also were incredibly inclusive and diverse, but like it like that wasn't their identity. Like it was part of it. Like it drove certain decisions and stuff, but you can tell like it wasn't. How do I phrase it? Like it was more mindfully done. Like they're more three-dimensional characters, if that makes sense. It isn't like they had depth. I think that's what like can sometimes be missing is like they won't care about the character because there isn't enough depth to it because you're some writer, lazy writer's mission is, oh, I just want to do X thing, and that's kind of as far as it goes. Where it should
Yeah.
be, and again, like I'm not a writer, so
But
it's
like all
obviously,
this stuff is incremental. Like a
yeah,
lot of those characters who are not white, voiced by white people.
exactly.
Like part of the thing with representational stuff that frustrates you is like it's a long view. Like part of it is you just need more of it. Its bulk is like part of the issue, and the discussion becomes bad a lot of the time around that stuff because this one thing that is just one story has to stand for a whole group of representation because there isn't enough other things to stand for that.
Yeah, absolutely, and like that,
And that
yeah,
that just happens all the time with fucking anything,
and then you lose the
it's
complexity.
it's always frustrating. Yeah.
Like if you have to have like one definitive version of something, like you're right, like that's where you get frustrated. Or like even like speaking as gay man, like how many movie like there's
Totally.
the one gay side character, and they always have to be feminine, outrageous, like, and like I love, like I have people in my life that are
And then-
like that, but when it's like that's the only acceptable, palatable version, then it's
And
like,
then that becomes a trope, and that becomes the way it's always done over and over again. And they're like, it's not. There's nothing necessarily. In a lot of the cases, there isn't necessarily something inherently wrong with the thing itself. But when it becomes the thing, when it
it's
becomes
lazy.
the pillar, it becomes like gross.
Yeah.
Like it just becomes bad.
Like it becomes like a check mark, like, oh well, of course, like
Yeah.
we included that character, but it's like, did you really care enough about, like, did you care about that? Like I think that's the difference, is like, you need to know people of that, either ethnicity, race, sexuality, etc., and like that's where the complexity comes from. And I think a lot of people sometimes get scared off where it's like, oh well, if it's too like into like either the specifics of their story or like heritage, background, etc., like people won't get it because they can't relate. But I think people do relate when it is something more specific. Like even though you can't relate, there's like that common just relatability where like I remember learning this in my forced poetry 101 class in college, is that like there's power in specifics. Like poems that are too general, people don't give a shit about. Those become cliches and they don't hit you emotionally. They just kind of wash over you. Where like the more specific you are about something, that's palatable to someone. That's what will hit you. And I think it's similar even with music, where like, no, I didn't break up with my, whatever, like, what's a go-to example? Like in the latest Dixie Chicks album, right? Like she got cheated on her husband, and the husband cheated on her with like a girlfriend in a boat, right? Not many people can probably relate to that. But when she describes like the very specific details of her waking up, discovering that it happened, all those sort of things, it's like, holy shit, man. Like I can remember specifics of etc. thing, or it's real, like there's more emotional weight behind specifics. And when you lose that, because you can tell people either don't know it enough, or like they come from a different angle on it, like I don't know, like it never reads across the wrong way. And then of course it starts such a toxic conversation of like, oh well, then you don't care about diversity, or you don't care about this, or and it's just like, well, no, like I still want those things, but just handled with care, or handled in a different angle, and I think that's where like,
and sometimes it's like impossible to actually have that conversation just because there are people out there that's like, nope, you're like, I don't care what you think,
exactly,
but you're out here, or you have like you get responded to by those people or whatever. People then have to think about those people when they're talking, like that they're, even if like you agree with them, but what they're saying is like directed in a specific way because it's trying to fight against those other ideas, which is like useful in terms of like a strategic way to make the world better maybe, but I don't need to listen to it.
Yeah, if that's like it, like it kind of like it becomes a tool. It isn't like,
it's not a conversation anymore. It's a weapon.
And like
it's a dialogue weapon.
And like Or like I
Which
even think
it still has a value, but isn't the value of conversation.
Mhm.
It's not. It doesn't fit.
And also, like with certain mediums, it's one-sided then, because it's not like everyone has
Yeah,
the ability to write their own like, yes, technically they do, but you know what I mean. Like they can't
yeah,
either properly represent their side or like feel like they're understood, and like that happens on both angles. And I think that's where a lot of frustration will come from, and I think that's like where the power of just more, more, and more. Like the more that there
yeah,
is, the more people will be able to find, learn from each other, see what works, see what doesn't work, instead of like you said, trying to create like one definitive version, because that's just impossible.
yeah,
You're just going to piss off everyone. You're going to make no one
yeah.
happy. But I feel like a lot of people at times like, oh, in order to appeal to the mass amount of people, we need to like it becomes like a formula. Like we need to focus test the shit out of this until it's so bland and unrecognizable that like no one's happy. No one's left
Yeah.
like.
No, I have a great example of a something that seems totally unrelated.
Mhm.
Anime.
Yes.
You know why there's a lot of great anime? Because Japan makes so many fucking animated shows
Mhm.
compared to everyone else.
True.
Like, they just make so much.
Yes.
And some of it's good. Like, this small number of it is really great.
Mhm.
But it's part of it's just they make so much.
Yes. Agreed. And that's why it's like give, like smaller creators or smaller studios, and I think like we see that with like
Yeah.
music especially now, because of like beforehand it was like unless you're signed to a label, like people are not going to hear your music. Now with streaming and everything else like that, people like it's so accessible. And then similar with video games to a lesser degree, like beforehand, like unless you were a AAA studio or you were like partnered with whatever, like you're not getting your story or video game across. Now there's
Yeah.
billions of indie games, and like you said, like similar to anime where it's like there's so much of it, people will be able to find, knock on wood, like what works, what relates to them, what's personable, etc. And like eventually the cream rises. Like people will hear about it, like, and I think that's so important
Yeah.
almost for every medium, but it feels like with
Yeah.
I don't know, at least my experience with comics, which, again, is not nearly as educated as yours, like I feel like that's like a growing pain that they're still dealing with.
I mean, the thing with comics is just it's so the the market is so dominated by superheroes since
Mm,
superheroes came in. It's
yes.
like, and I like that stuff, so I'm okay with it. But certainly, and the way people talk about it is weird because like
Yes.
there's plenty of stuff for kids that is of all kinds of stories,
Hmm.
but that stuff's also just not that interesting to me
Of course.
generally. But
Yes.
there is a lot of it out there.
I think like
It's the problem is like, oh, I mean, probably the problem is probably Diamond. Like the direct market angle of it is just a whole different beast than like the kids books that get to be in, you know, big stores like
hmm
Target or Walmart or whatever.
yeah, and also I think like it's comic books are such a more niche market that I feel like there's less
Yeah.
room for quote unquote failure with certain
I
risks,
feel like,
and that can like
yeah,
be
one
the
of the turning
enemy.
points for me for how I think about comic books was when I started looking at the numbers for the number of people buying comic books.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, that's why these comics were getting canceled. Like 20,000 people were reading it or whatever.
Hmm.
like like a great comic, like a really popular comic will be like a million and a half
Okay.
issues sold.
Nice.
And like if a Marvel or DC comic gets down to around 20,000 issues being sold, it's probably when the series is going to get canceled.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
And it's
there's.
just such a small number compared to like what you get with the movies or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
and it put into focus like there are a lot of people that complain about certain things on comics on the internet,
Hmm.
and a lot of them aren't actually buying comics. So because it's kind of a like I kind of get it. It's kind of a pain in the ass or whatever. And it's gonna get expensive. So like the market gets determined by that
Mm.
because you know
that's what will get publicity
Well,
or narratives
yeah,
formed,
the
and
the like buying issues comic book market or whatever, like the web comic world, which is a whole different world, which is way more diverse because it's way more accessible.
yes,
Like that's a whole different beast.
totally. And I think like, yeah, like you're saying, like if like
But it doesn't like it generally doesn't have the cultural cachet or whatever
yes,
because they're not iconic characters that then tie into movies that millions of people watch.
yeah, that like will drive future
Yeah,
video
like
game
more
plots,
like superhero comics really are a farm system for ideas for
movies
the
and video
movies.
games. Yeah,
That's which has been to their benefit because the thing I like about superhero comics is they pay really talented writers and creators they get to do their thing. They're not like weirdly for companies that are controlled by corporations. Like Marvel's been really good about this. DC just changed their whole leadership, so I hope they'll be better going forward.
nice.
Just like letting people ride, and like they'll only get to ride for so long if the comic doesn't sell, but they'll get to like do their idea, whatever. There's just like way more interesting stuff going on with comics right now. Like interesting stuff like all the X-Men are gonna have a fighting game tournament where they all have swords. Brilliant.
Awesome.
Also, fun fact, Wolverine, Cyclops, and Jean Grey, they're just a threesome now.
Oh,
Just the open.
nice.
I
support that.
There's like a map of the X Mansion. They just all have beds in the same room.
Now, like my mind goes to like the plots of like the first X-Men movies, where like like them fighting over Jean was like a thing. Imagine just
Yeah.
like, oh, that's how the story ended. Like just
Yeah, no.
That's awesome.
They solved it. They solved the problem.
Bam. No infighting. Everyone's happy. That's.
Yeah.
I feel
Also,
like
the
that's the
X-Men are
moral
weird, like
of this
immortals
episode.
now.
What'd you say?
They die. They're weird immortals. Like they die and get reborn.
True.
There's weird stuff going on in X-Men comics.
But I loved like, I'm sure did you watch like the X-Men cartoons growing up?
Oh yeah, I mean those '90s cartoons, the X-Men animated show, and
Evolution.
the
I think
Spider-Man
it
show were
Was it?
no Evolution
was
the
2000s,
second
right?
one. Yeah.
Okay. See,
The,
I
the
watched
'90s X-Men, which was the first full series of X-Men,
Yeah.
those were big for me.
with like the dramatic.
Which is funny. It's funny that I cared about Marvel so much because the Batman show from that era was such a better TV show. Like the production values were better, the stories were better, but
Well,
when it
yeah.
kind of worked against it because then when I read Batman comics, I'm like, this isn't as good as the show. Whereas when I read Marvel comics, like, this is also garbage. This is great.
That's true.
This is of equivalent quality. This is probably even better.
Yeah, but then like
Because it doesn't have weird frame rate issues that like the Spider-Man cartoon had.
But then Batman sort of like had the last laugh though, because like that's where Harley Quinn came in, and then she's done everything that she's done, so it's like it sort of get last laugh because it's like, hey, more.
I mean, Batman's
culturally
just been
relevant, maybe?
incredibly
I don't know.
powerful.
But I do love the older, like I'm just like the mental like gifts.
I would
and
also
memes
watch
from
all of
those
like
shows
the
are playing
old,
through my head
like
right
if
now.
you watch the Marvel stuff that they made before the '90s, that's really bad. Like that's when
That's a dark hole.
need this. Like the weird X-Men pilots they did for Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Iceman and Firestar. Firestar, character created for a TV show because they were like, I don't think they could get the rights to the Human Torch. Is why they didn't do it.
Okay.
Why they replaced it, and then they're like, well, we might as well replace him with a girl.
Nice.
We should have a girl.
True.
So they created Firestar, and then she worked her way into the comics.
Nice.
Eventually, joined the Avengers and stuff.
And that's gonna be.
And got cancer. I think her powers started giving her cancer.
Oh Like,
at one point. That was less good.
see,
The
like,
microwave. She had microwave heat powers.
like I just
I
wonder
think they gave
like
her
what the
cancer.
office looks like for these certain writing suits. Is it just like a fucking things on a dartboard and then just like, all right, microwave cancer, bam, done. Next
How do
comic.
we add pathos? Cancer. Done. Is somebody thinking about microwaves for too long? Microwaves. Cancer? Question mark?
Just
Thumbs
drawing
up?
random words from a fucking hat, and they're like, all right, make it work, make it work. See, like I need like, can the next episode be like us just please like reading down like the most absurd, funniest like comic book storylines or like things that happen to characters? I would find that incredibly amusing.
Hell yeah.
All right, is that where we want to end off?
Yeah, that seems like a good place to stop.
All
We
right,
have a plan for the next episode.
until